Just fucking do it. Subscribe now. You're live. By the way, nobody gave a shit that you were gone because I asked. The real question should have been, where does he live and what's he going after? So if you're in the UK or the US or whatever, and he was doing healthcare, that's one less competitor. But nobody asked that. It just didn't give a shit that you were here. We're gone. We have a whole bunch of things to cover today. We've gone through, the only thing we haven't gone through is other professionals. And I normally leave that to the last, or sometimes I don't even cover it because unless you're using petroleum engineers, structural engineers, and other industry experts, there are no other professionals. But if a Ryder Scott, which is a big engineering firm, petroleum engineering firm, and so there are others, but for the most part, to be on your dream team. But unless you're in some really specific verticals of certain industries, there are no other professionals other than the ones that we've described. There's 2 or 3 things I told you, and one of which you brought up yesterday, and there's 1 or 2 others that I'm going to cover today that I hadn't covered, and I said that we'd push it off. Okay. In addition to going through your goals and your affirmations, we're not going to go through your goals and affirmations on YouTube. We're going to protect the guilty or innocent, depending on how you look at it. Although last night, when I was doing my goals and affirmations, I have a little table with a drawer with I have a Bible and some other stuff, and I noticed my rosary was there, on top of the table. That's not where it belongs. It belongs hanging on a hook behind me on my bedpost, kind of. And that rosary I got 1951 when I had my first communion. And I want to know, what the fuck, why is it out? More importantly, why is it fucking broken? I've had it since 1951 and it wasn't broken. And then I asked Sally, and Sally said, the electrical guys were putting in a new security system. It was ADT, I think. So ADT fucking broke it. I have several rosaries that I've been given over the years. And so they're all hanging on this post just about here from my head when I'm asleep. And those other ones are really thick. I mean, heavy shit, But this old, flimsy rosary, so it's broken now. So I'll get it fixed. But it got me thinking. I'm looking at my affirmations and goals, and the card that they're on is all kind of worn. And I know I must have changed it, but it doesn't look like a change. It looks fucking 50 years old. I mean, it's all crinkly. And so I was thinking about goals and affirmation vis-a-vis this morning, and later on today, whenever we get done covering it. And this is before you say anything to me. The biggest error is you underestimate what you can do, and you don't fully appreciate that you're never going to achieve anything higher than your wildest expectation of yourself. Even though you guys got to see TK. And what he did in 11 plus months is a little bit above what he wanted to do in his lifetime. You saw it with your own eyes. And assuming that he's not an actor from Central Casting and this other thing, and he brought his wife, and he's from Podunk fucking USA, it's pretty remarkable. Now, the kids are going to see it. The next seminar will see it on film. Okay, but you saw it. And he was nervous. He was prancing back. He knocked the fucking bottles off the table. And you saw him, right? But it's, that's just one short blitz of trying to rewire you. But you got to see it in person. And so, those memories should live with you. But it's difficult. It's hard as hell. I told you yesterday when I was reading out the example, there are guys that put, $10 million a month. By God, they got $10 million a month. There are people that put $25 million a month. And by God, they got $25.5 million a month. You saw my 17 months from the time I thought of the castle to the time I moved in, September 1, 1984. They say that there was 1 million permutations. I told about one of the greatest QLA stories of all time was when President Kennedy said we're going to put a guy on the moon this decade, safely bring him back, blah, 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 right? But there's even a other great QLA, and it has to do with President Obama. When he was smoking weed at Whittier College in Los Angeles, and he said he was going to be the first, he was going to be a president, first black president. I don't know what the guys that were around him said. What the fuck's wrong with you? Probably. And then he became president. That's a jillion permutations had to happen for that to happen. And even though I don't like his politics, I take my hat off to him for that. Because that, either he was brain dead on drugs, flapping his lips, or he is a fucking genius that he orchestrated all that. But a lot of things had to come into play for him to become the first black president. I mean, a gazillion things had to come into play. It happens. And I'm told that, although I've never met that president, I'd like to someday, that he was steadfast, and Michelle helped him, his wife, his lovely wife, who I've also never met, who I'm told is smarter than he is. I don't know if that's true, but yeah, I'm told he's smarter than he is. A lot of shit happened, though. A lot of shit happened. And the same can happen to you. But Obama believed. There's no question that Obama believed. But probably more importantly, Michelle believed in him, but it got done. But it's hard to appreciate. It's hard to appreciate things like TK. It's hard. But I've seen it. I know what you can do. I know what the most miserable piece of shit in this room can do. Because I've seen it with these fucking eyes. There's a great scene in Blade Runner, which I've already mentioned the first couple of days, when the android gets up there and says, "These eyes have seen." Well, these motherfucking eyes have seen. And I've seen dingleberries that should have hung on my ass become billionaires. These eyes have seen. Why not you? There's no reason it can't be you. If you want it bad enough. If you never give up. Those who start first and stay laser beam focused the longest win. The model works. There's no question that the model works. It works for 80 IQ and 180 IQ. Believe me, you don't have to worry about the 180 IQ. I know a couple of you might think you're smart, but you don't have to worry about being at that end of the continuum. But it works for everybody. Average people. You've seen the Hungarian Forrest Gump. The quiet guy. Okay? Forget the Goomba Brothers and forget Simon the Bell, which are closer to being alpha males. Although only one of the Goomba Brothers is an alpha male, and that's Tony the loudmouth. But you can do this. You can do this. Now, even though I call it an anchor chairman, don't you be calling it an anchor chairman. And we have some of you in this room, when you're writing the emails, you're going to say the anchor chairman. That's to remind you that if, like in construction or in a building, you have a 100-story building and you want the first 30 floors to be Bank of America, or the first 30 floors to be British Petroleum. That's your anchor tenant. And then you leverage off those 30 floors to lease, rent everybody else the rest of the building. But you're not referring to him or her or it as an anchor chairperson. That's just there to remind you the system is based on the chairman, who becomes your mentor, not your friend, and is a person that's, fills the breach for you when they come after you. But just as brownstone, the templates you're going to get in the thumb drive Some of you will put Brownstone. Some of you are going to say Michael Pierce, who was the founder of Brownstone. And some of you are going to use Anchor Chairman. And we talked about the board of directors in general, and specifically we talked about the accountants, the lawyers, and then I just mentioned a couple of minutes ago the other professionals. Last night you saw my virtual mentor, Mr. Carnegie. And you know, I stayed at Skibo Castle. You know, I almost bought Skibo Castle once a number of years ago. You know, allegedly, the story about Napoleon Hill, blah, 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 blah. We discussed all that. You know that his wife's bedroom, you need a long-range bomber with refueling capability to find in the big house. You know that Sally and I stayed in his daughter's suite when we stayed there. What feedback, comments do you have about Mr. Carnegie? Yes, in the back.
He had a very tough mother, and she said, what good will it do if nobody can see it? So when they were riding in the carriage, yeah.
He was a mama's boy. He was attached to her skirt. I was a mama's boy until I was about 7 or 8. My cousins used to say Dan is sewn to his mother's left leg. But they weren't saying it in a good way, believe me. He was a mama's boy, and he wanted to prove to his mom and his family, his mother was humiliated when they had to leave with their tail between their legs and go to the United States. And of course, the rest is history. What else about Mr. Carnegie? Again.
At the end, when he got his money, he said, I probably should have asked for more.
That's one of the old story. When they accept the first offer, I mean, you know it was categorically too low. And I've suffered from that, I don't know, half a dozen times. And it's almost impossible to go back. You're screwed, basically. And the J.P. Morgan, who I can give a whole seminar about him, and that one of the things that drove him was his disfigurement in his face. And nobody, but he had, what's it called when your pores get big and red? Not propecia, that's something else. Yeah, but his nose was like a red cherry. And if you notice some of if you go to J.P. Morgan, the painting of him is so it deflects that. But he was insecure because of how he looked. Some people say Andrew Carnegie because he wasn't a dwarf, but he was a height disadvantaged person. But I don't give a shit if you got 3 legs and 4 eyes. I mean, if that's what gets you across the goal line, I'm for it. I support it. Yes.
His mentor helped him flip his mindset to having nothing wrong with being on top.
And what did he do to his mentor? Fucked him. Yes. And I've seen that. Of course, I love it when a son turns on a mother. I love it when a daughter cuts her father's throat and leaves him bleed out. And I've seen it. I get sexually excited when that happens. Because I told the mother, I told the father. They didn't listen to me. And this hasn't happened once, twice, 5, 10, 20, 25 times. You couldn't have convinced my mom, who died here, that I would ever, ever, ever turn on her, as they say in the hood, put a cap in her ass. There's no set of circumstances, even if God himself came down and told her. And a lot of moms are that way. But it does happen. I'm not encouraging that. I'm just telling you it does happen. That's why I say blood's thicker than water and money's thicker than both. What else about Mr. Carnegie? Yes, sir.
Something that stood out to me was about Mr. Carnegie's partner, Mr. Peck. And when we make up excuses and not finish the job, the guy was shot in the neck, stabbed, and then went back to work and finished the day?
Well, that reminds me being not that I've been stabbed, but and my cousin who stabbed that kid 17 times. But when John Wilkes Booth assassinated President Lincoln, the other two guys, one of the guys stabbed the Secretary of War. I forget what his name was. Stabbed him, cut him, and he didn't die. Because normally, unless you cut a main artery or a throat, you survive. Unless it's a bunch of stabs, you survive a stabbing. But I've given this seminar with 104 temperature. 104 temperature. I've given this seminar with a dislocated knee when I fell down the stairs, and there was a doctor, not a chiropractor, what are the bone doctors called? Yeah, and he said at the break in the third day, he said, Mr. Peña, you're carrying yourself, you're walking tilted. And he says, you do something, he thought it was my hip. I said, no, I dislocated my knee. I fell down, I was running down the stairs, and I slipped. And tonight when we go in for the main dinner, you'll see, and the stairs like this, and I put my hand on the thing and I used to run and spin off of it and land 3 or 4 steps below. I don't do that anymore. And I landed wrong. I dislocated my knee. But Alistair Cook, the famous BBC presenter, newscaster, told me 30 plus years ago, a professional is doing his job better when he doesn't feel like it. And now the kids get diarrhea. They don't come to work. They have a migraine, or they have a headache that they call a migraine. They don't come to work. There's 5 feet of snow. Of course, now I'm talking about before people work at home. Lou Gessner, who left American Express to join IBM about 25, 30 years ago to turn it around. He went from McKinsey, as I recall, to PepsiCo, to American Express, to IBM, and he was a great leader. And they had a snowstorm in Buffalo, wherever IBM's headquarters is in upstate New York, okay? And there was, 8 or 10 feet of snowdrift, and only about 5 or 10% of the employees showed up. And so the CFO, not him, who was also a hard-charging ball buster, he had 15, 20, 30 people that did come to work get on the phones, because this is just at the beginning of the internet, and not everybody had internet connection, and called the 800 or 900 employees that should have been at corporate headquarters and told them, get a fucking snowplow hooked to your car. If you're not at work tomorrow, you don't have a job. 87% of the people that hadn't come to work those 2 previous days were at work. At work. And of course, that's the antithesis of today. You do that now, that's how I still do. But if you do that now, it's amazing the outrageous shit I say. I'm not in court every day. But smart people are afraid of me, because I'll fuck you up. When I say I'm going to fuck you up, I mean it. I'm not just flapping my lips. Okay, what else about Mr. Carnegie?
He would do whatever it takes to win, whether it's lying, being deceptive, or disruptor.
Now, you're describing 98% of all the high-performance icons that you look up to. Now, I don't look up to any of these fuckers, but you do. Because you disassociate, and I've been saying it every day, you disassociate their success and their trappings with how they got them. Now, some of you are goody two-shoe enough, and I don't mean that in a bad way, that if you knew, you wouldn't like Steve Jobs anymore, or you wouldn't revere him, or whatever the right word is. You wouldn't, even Bill Gates. You wouldn't, because you'd have a moral dilemma, a conundrum, as they say. You couldn't, and still believe in the things you believe in. I believe, and Sally believes, the psychologist in her, believe that down deep inside you know, but you just block it out. You don't want to know. You don't want to know. I don't care if you know or you don't know, actually. All I want is the numbers. All I want is results. And after you get to be a billionaire, or not breaking point, but when you have about 250 million in after-tax money someplace, your life changes forever. And you will justify every fucking thing you ever did in your life. From cheating on your significant other to, abandoning your mother. I mean, you will justify because, it's like I say, what are they going to do to me? They can't put me back in the army. I'm too old. I have my money spread around the world. I pay taxes. What are they going to do to me? And as when I told the BBC BAFTA gal yesterday, what are they going to do to me? Because people are still struggling is not the right word. Why I would go into politics at age that I am and open my life up to ridicule. And Sally supports anything I do, but she is less hot about politics than anything I've ever done. She's still supportive, but she's less excited, thrilled about this last, it won't be my last thing. Okay, what else about Mr. Carnegie? Yes, sir.
He is a destroyer of unions, and no union operated in the steel industry for over 45 years.
And when they were killing people in the unions, when he hired the Pinkertons, which I use, out of Glasgow, Scotland. They're now owned by a big security firm. And in those days, you hired them like an army. And these were uneducated, illiterate Scots, which some would say that Glasgow hasn't changed any. The life expectancy in Glasgow is 57. The rest of the world is 77. Because it's sex, drugs, and fucking rock and roll. They start the day, well, the legend is they start the day with drugs and beer. If they can't afford drugs, beer. And, but he hired the Pinkertons, and there were people killed, and he ran to Europe to hide. But there's a reason why he has no awards. There's a reason why he doesn't have any letters of recommendation. But I still revere him. I mean, he was a smart little shit. He's a smart little shit. And I still, after now almost 30 years, nobody's going to be selling this. Nothing's going to change. Sally was right 25 years ago. Because there's virtually no fees involved. We've had Goldman Sachs guys, 25 years, retire with a lot of money, and they come with the Goldman Sachs shield, but without the Goldman Sachs balance sheet behind them, and they struggle with this program. Because they've never picked up the phone. They've only picked up the phone when they were phoning them, never picked up the phone and phoned anybody because of Goldman Sachs' name. And Goldman Sachs is the preeminent and deserves the reputation. But once you leave Goldman Sachs, unless you were CEO, CFO, or something like that, nobody gives a shit. Anything else about Mr. Carnegie? Yes, again.
Similar to what Steve Ballmer mentioned, he focused on cost rather than his competitors focusing on profit.
Well, that's because he was a cheap Scot. Copper wire was invented by a Yorkshireman and a Scotsman fighting over a penny. That's how copper wire was invented. Because Sally's background, Yorkshire is very similar to here in Scotland, and Sally's a Yorkshire gal, and they're close with their money. As they say, they're close with their money, and they are. And the Scots up here are close with their money. Okay, if nothing else about Mr. Carnegie, we'll move on. Thank you, YouTube.